All right, thank you very much, Sarah. Thanks for joining us. Lisa, thanks for coming over. We appreciate making the drive. We're really excited to have you here and talk about this mysterious booming noise. We've been following it. It's gotten local, then state, and then national attention, international attention. Everyone who wants to know, what is this noise, what's causing it, and is it going to stop? So maybe you could tell us what the latest is. There was just some news this week with the booms.
Yes, we started out for around the first 3 days not knowing anything, and that I think is what drew a lot of the attention, was the mystery behind it. And on our fourth day, Thursday of that first week, the USGS, the United States Geological Survey, called us and said that in 5 minutes we are going to post that you did in fact have an earthquake. So that is officially what those booms are caused by. It's been a learning process for everybody in Clintonville, because there are obviously some people who've lived through other earthquakes who don't think the experience is the same and have a little bit of skepticism.
So what's happened since then? It sounds like they haven't stopped.
They are much smaller in their intensity and don't seem to be as loud, but we do get some small volume of calls still coming into the police department. And the second week, although it had been quiet for 3 or 4 days, we did have another large event that didn't register because of some of the interference, and we didn't have seismometers in our area yet. But it has gotten a lot better. I don't think it's waking people up in the night, as I said, because they're less intense, but there are still some calls coming in here and there.
So what were the sounds like? They've been described as everything from a jackhammer to I thought my house was going to fall down to just kind of a rumble, like distant thunder. So what would you describe it as, and have you heard it?
Yes, I was there. I'm not in the area where I actually live, so I didn't experience it at my house. But obviously, working as many hours as we did during the last 3 weeks, we were in the neighborhood where it was more intense. One time I was standing on a cement sidewalk, and you heard this loud exploding, just booming noise coming from underground, and the earth definitely shook. And not in a rumbling way in the experience that I had. It was more of, I'd say, a jolt, where it just jolted the ground. And then the second night, we were in our utility building, which is also in that neighborhood, and it was incredibly loud. Just, again, a very loud bang, like something exploded right outside the building, and the entire floor just shook below you.
So you've got experts on the case now. So tell us who's there now, and what are they looking for? What kind of equipment's there?
Because it had quieted down even after we had the first earthquake, we let things settle and didn't do anything for a couple of days, because it didn't seem to make sense if it was going to be over. Then when we had our second week, the large event on that Tuesday, it made sense for us to bring somebody in. And so Michigan Technological University, actually, one of their geologists in their science department volunteered to come with 2 graduate students, and they brought 4 seismometers that they have. And then we coordinated with the USGS to get equipment from them to be able to live feed back that data right to the USGS.
Okay, so it sounded like it was a traveling array that caught the first big one, because some people had questions, I thought you ruled out an earthquake. You told us it wasn't an earthquake, and now it is, and that kind of fueled some of the skepticism. So it sounds like that was a traveling array, and then this has been there since then?
There's 3 different types. There's permanent seismology machines, which are owned by the USGS, and those were only 2 devices, which is why we got the answer in the beginning that there was no earthquake, or it didn't appear to be an earthquake. These temporary arrays are actually owned by an organization called IRIS, and they are moving from the west coast to the east coast, and just so happened during this event to be between Michigan and Minnesota. And so there's a delay in the information from those seismometers getting to the USGS, so on Thursday morning was their first access to that information. So there were 6 in our area, so now they had 8 machines, which a number of them captured it. Then since then, after the second week, is the Michigan Tech equipment, which is actually 4 seismometers, 3 right around the city and 1 in the city limits.
Okay, so you're pretty convinced this is an earthquake activity? It's a series of small earthquakes?
Yes, they call it a swarm of earthquakes, and so each event is its own earthquake. People have asked about foreshocks, aftershocks. They've indicated that that's very unlikely, that each event stands on its own. There isn't things happening before or after that. And so I do believe there's every reason for all the things that we've learned in the last couple of weeks that it makes sense. People have questions about different things, but the geologists or the experts, they have answers and can help us understand each time someone has a question.
So what question do you get the most?
People are skeptical about the sounds often. I think one of the people even has a question about that. And one of the things that people say is, I've been in California, this is no earthquake, you don't hear booms in California. One of the things that the geologists have explained to us is that our earthquakes tend to be much more shallow than the ones out in California. And so when you think about logically, when that fault or that movement in the rock happens closer to the surface, you should hear more. Just like if anything happened in the world that was close to you or far away from you, you're going to hear more because it's close. So that's one thing. The second thing is that they say that our rock here in Wisconsin compared to where we more typically have earthquakes in California is different. It's older rock, it's colder rock, and it tends to make more noise than those in California. And so you hear more rumbling noises out there, and this booming, they said, is a fairly natural occurrence, although we don't have a lot of earthquakes. But if we do have them in this part, and they seem to say east and west of the Rockies is where your experience changes. So because we're east, it's common.
Okay. It seemed like we got a lot of questions about how can this only be noticed in a small neighborhood. We're talking about a pretty isolated area that really got a lot of attention. I mean, only at 3-4 blocks that it was really hurt a lot. So what was the explanation for that?
I think, again, this is the earth. Nobody controls it. You don't know. There can be very small areas of those fractures occurring. And so it was heard in a small area, but what people started noticing over time is that they didn't know what they were hearing, and then as people were closer and then would be further away, they could hear it. And you could hear it from further away. So I just don't think it was as intense. And smaller events, which this was, wouldn't necessarily travel as far.
What about the night aspect? A lot of people were saying, this is ridiculous. How can this only be happening at night? Is it because they only notice it at night?
That was the biggest reason that the USGS explained. And first we want to clarify, we did get phone calls and reports during the day. Our largest industry, one of our largest industries, but the largest in that neighborhood, Seagrave Fire Apparatus, who builds fire trucks, obviously had lots of employees there during the day, and they heard it regularly during the day. One of the things is a lot of people are gone in that neighborhood if they're going off to work, kids are in school. So number one, were they home during the day to report it? Possibly many of them were gone. And secondly, as the geologists explained, life's busier during the day. There's more noise outside, you're busier doing different things. And so when people quiet down at night, you tend to hear some of those smaller events more than you would during the day. But they clearly occurred both day and night.
So it sounds like there's been two confirmed cases of measured, this is it. Is that it? There's been 2 measured so far, or have there been more?
There's been 2, and the additional things that they've noticed are where they see activity, but you have to have, from a scientific standpoint, enough data to actually what they call triangulate and be able to confirm. So while we have other times that we've called in and they can't confirm it, they say that they can see activity, so it's very likely that there was another event, but we just can't tell you what the magnitude is. We can't tell you where the epicenter was.
All right, we have a question from our online audience.
Were there any reports of strange smells or flashes of light?
From what I understand, no one saw light. And at one time, there's actually some footage of us out there where we were checking some manholes because somebody had talked about a sewer gas smell. At the time, we believe there's a large farm to the southwest of the community, and we think that they had just laid out some manure in the fields, and so it sort of was a swampy sewer gas. We came back out, I don't remember how many days into the beginning of it was, but I think it was in the second week, and we again took a number of manholes and checked to see if there was any elevated gas levels. And there was not, as there hadn't been that first night, which is the first thing that we had checked. And so didn't hear any reports of light, and the smells were very minor incidents that seemed to go away very quickly.
Do you get a lot of questions about the light, kind of that extraterrestrial type
Yeah,
theory?
a few people ask that. It's amazing the things that have come in. I've literally received hundreds of emails from all over the world with people,
experts, I'm sure.
Yes, and I think every one of them means well. Obviously, they have their own worries, concerns, questions, reasons why they think, and it's been very interesting, all the things that people have said.
We have another question.
Will geologists be doing any drilling or taking core samples to see what's under Clintonville?
Not at this time. They have indicated that because of how deep although our events are shallow, they're still deep enough that it's very difficult to get down to any level of getting answers. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense to actually go down and try to dig that far down into the Earth's core.
The city has invested some money in this, though, right? How much has the city spent, aside from your time and all the time work doing it?
All of us that were there were salaried, so that didn't cost anything, obviously. I would say, we did have one group of engineers come in just in the beginning while that mystery time was still going on, and that we haven't received any invoices yet, but that may be a couple $1,000s. There's the second group of engineers that were going to bring the seismometers in, and then when we confirmed the earthquake, decided to cancel that. There may be a couple $1,000 there, but I wouldn't think it would be more than probably $5,000 to $6,000, and in the course of 3 weeks and a lot of major activity going on. Not that we want to spend that kind of money, but it's fairly reasonable and small.
That part of it, there wasn't a lot of damage done to buildings, right? Was there any confirmed reported damage?
One resident who lives near our park in the center of the community has indicated that she has new cracks in her foundation and basement. Obviously, not bringing in engineers or structural engineers, it's difficult to determine what's normal, what's new, old, what could be caused from the spring. Other than that, we've received no reports of physical property damage and obviously, thankfully, no personal injury.
So you had talked about kind of your belief, and you had been convinced. Do you think most of the residents are convinced now that this is settled, we know what it is, it's under control?
If I had to say do more believe or not believe, I definitely think more people believe. There are certainly people, though, that are skeptical, that even just this week on Facebook, people said it can't be, there's something else. We have no reason at the city. I think we've tried really hard over the last 3 weeks to be completely honest and say everything that we know, and we have absolutely no reason to hide anything or cover anything up. And so what we know is what the public knows, and I do believe it's earthquakes, and I think we have every reason to show scientifically that that's what it is.
So those first few days, it seemed like it was uncertainty, but also people were a little frightened. I mean, they were nervous. Were there other emotions, and then when did that start changing?
I think clearly day one, when you're all out there at 2 o'clock in the morning and every single person's out on their front porch in a fairly big area, standing in their pajamas and hearing those noises, our first natural reaction is it's got to be gas, because it sounded like explosions, and the fear obviously is, do you evacuate, do you not? We walked many blocks and checked every manhole starting at one end, heading north on 3 different streets where the majority of the calls came in, and there wasn't one detectable elevated level. And so I think clearly day one people were scared and what's going on, and is something going to blow up. I think probably by day 3 it sort of turned into, obviously if something hasn't happened yet, it's not an incredibly dangerous situation, but it's becoming frustrating. We want answers. What's going on? Why isn't it stopping? And again, then we had that big meeting on day 3, tried to do the best to answer that we were still looking into things, and then all of a sudden on day 4 we got a call.
Was that a relief to get that answer?
To be completely honest, the first 2 minutes of digesting it, I was like, are you kidding me? I just told everybody this wasn't an earthquake, and now I need to go back tonight and say it was. What we learned through that process was living in an area where we're not used to having to deal with the USGS as an organization. There was a bit of disconnect when we were speaking to people in Madison, thinking that meant we were really speaking to people at the federal level, and there just wasn't a lot of communication that we knew that we maybe should have had that we didn't, and they weren't hearing from us, so they weren't calling us. So obviously there's a learning lesson from that, and I think all of us in this area, if it continued in other parts other than Clintonville, can learn from the experience. And not that we did anything wrong, because it was a new experience, but it was a bit of a shock those first few minutes.
So it sounded like you heard from a lot of people. Where was the furthest away you heard from, as far as either offering help or offering suggestions on what they thought was happening?
I would say most of the information that we got from people just being curious, not media people, would have been from the continental U.S. and all over. So from coast to coast, people on the East Coast in Maine all the way to Washington on the West Coast. In terms of media, then it became more international, and the furthest away there would have been Japanese TV.
Wow, so that's a long way to be interested in it. Is Clintonville getting back to normal now? It sounded like it was just kind of wacky for a couple weeks there.
It's still pretty busy at City Hall. We sort of went into this, dealing with the media and making sure that the citizens had their questions answered. And then the mayor decided that it'd be a great idea to do these T-shirts, which has been a lot of fun, to, again, not make light of the situation, but to bring our community together, show unity. This isn't anything that someone will ever forget. And so now I almost feel like I have a part-time job in T-shirt sales. We've sold almost 600 T-shirts in just a week.
And you brought one, right? You can show us what they look like.
I can, right now.
Yeah, if you have them.
Sure. We have them in 7 different colors. This is what they look like. It says, "I survived the 1.5 on the front, and then on the one sleeve it just says Clintonville, Wisconsin, and the date of our official earthquake, March 20th. So we have them in 7 different colors. They can get them online at our website, clintonvillewi.org, or they can certainly come to Clintonville in a variety of stores to buy them.
The 1.5 is the 1.5 magnitude earthquake.
Yeah.
So that was the first documented, but there have been some more. So
yes, those were smaller. We may have had bigger ones again in some of those that couldn't be confirmed, but...
And have you seen there's been some internet pictures floating around with the chair tipped over. Have you seen that?
Yes, I have. I think I got that the first morning.
What did you think of that?
Definitely got to have a sense of humor about it. Again, we wouldn't make light if someone had been hurt or serious damage had taken place, but it is funny because to the rest of the world, that 1.5 is so small and the magnitude is obviously not great, but clearly was disruptive to people's lives. But yes, the tipped over chair was quite funny.
So you said you maybe learned some management things. Were there other things that surprised you about this whole process that it was just like, this is crazy, or I didn't expect this?
I think what was different about this experience from an emergency management standpoint was that typically when you have an emergency in our area, there's a lot of work to be done in terms of you might have electrical crews out, putting power lines back up. You might have street employees picking up trees, and fire and police kind of keeping people intact and informed and things like that. What was interesting was that as soon as we knew that there was nothing for us to figure out in the field, we spent so much time at City Hall making phone calls and asking questions and making lists of things that we could check off and make sure that it wasn't this, or this. But it was a surreal sense of, what do we do? You couldn't get out there and there'd be a booming sound, and yet we'd respond for those first few nights, and we'd all stand there like, well, there's nothing to do because there's nothing else to investigate. Right. We just have to try and figure this out, but there's nothing you could do out in the field. So it was definitely interesting.
So it sounded kind of frustrating almost.
Yeah.
We have another question from our audience.
Are there any thoughts that this could be linked to the booms that are being reported in other parts of the state, including Baraboo?
We have not specifically talked to the officials from Baraboo, and I think Montello was the other area that had happened on our second week. But I think that there's certainly reasons to believe that they may be experiencing some of that earth fracturing, rock adjusting noises. There's obviously other reasons. There can be like fracking and mining. We got lots of questions like that. There could be, I know we had a report somewhere one of the days that we were experiencing this in Waupaca County, and within 30 minutes of those calls coming into the sheriff's department, found out that somebody had an explosive permit to blow something up at a pit or something. So while everybody's more elevated in their awareness of these, I would certainly think there's reason to believe that it isn't just isolated here, but there's also lots of other man-made reasons why someone might hear isolated cases.
We have another question.
How long will the seismographic equipment be in place?
Haven't determined a set amount of time, but I would say it's fair to assume that after we spent the time and effort to get those into place, that they'll at least be there for a couple of weeks, and it'll also be based on what kind of activity. So if things continue to be quiet, I would think that we'd veer more towards a shorter amount of time, and if things continued, we would maybe leave them there longer. But I think at least for a couple more weeks.
So people are still sleeping through the night right now, right? They're not getting woken up in the middle of the night?
There's a couple calls that come in, and when I say a couple, I think there were none last night. There might be 1 or 2 in the middle of the night, but compared to those first few days of 150, 170 calls, clearly I think people are sleeping.
Were the police kind of overwhelmed by those first couple nights?
Yes, and you don't have even phone facilities that can just light up 20 people calling at once, and so we have 3 incoming lines, and it would just keep ringing for people until they'd hit an open line. So they did the best they could, really, again, making sure that it wasn't responding. There was no you need to come here because I'm injured. So it was really just for us keeping track of the locations that people were calling in, and we created a map through our GIS system where we plotted all those locations to see if there was a pattern.
We have another question.
Has Clintonville seen any financial gains, especially from media coming to town?
I think that's fair to assume that at least during those few weeks that hotels were filled, restaurants were occupied, gas stations, various things. There were media people there day and night. People from CNN, for example, stayed over, I think, 3 nights. NBC had 4 guys there for at least a night. They had nice dinners at our supper club in town. So I certainly think businesses gained during that time. And then our T-shirt sales, there's obviously some profit from each of those, and we had explained that there would be a small upcharge. The mayor's still going to decide once we know about how much money there is about something that maybe we could do to commemorate or something good to enhance or beautify the community. So I think it'll be fair to say that even from that effort, the city itself will probably get $3,000 to $5,000 from those shirt sales.
I also heard some speculation that the trucker's name might be out the window for the earthquakes. What do you think? Is that in the future?
I know some people, yes, I've heard the Quakers and the Boom Town and different things. Not that I think the trucker name will go away. It obviously is deep-seated in the community with Seagrave, but definitely will. We have our police chief and Beat the Heat has a car show, and they have it in May, and they're creating their posters right now, and it's going to be, I think on his poster it has Quake, Rattle, and Roll, and the event will go Quaker Shine instead of Rain or Shine. So people are going to start picking up on it and incorporating it into other events in the community.
So what's next now? Is there still audio equipment on the ground, and what will you guys be doing in addition to the seismic metering?
As you said, the seismometers will stay for a while. The USGS and Michigan Tech have some audio devices there that'll help pick up low frequency infrasound. We also have Brian Sullivan, who's the student that captured the actual audio that we sent out to the press, who has come back and forth a couple of times. So I think from that standpoint, as questions come up, we'll continue to educate ourselves and be able to relay that information. We are, as we send out T-shirts, giving out some pamphlets that we made just on earthquake awareness and how to be prepared, really very similar to things like we would already do in spring coming up here with Tornado Awareness Week and things like that. So I think we want to continue to educate the public. We want to let them know that we're going to continue to answer any questions that they have. We've encouraged people to call the USGS directly. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and are really very helpful in teaching and helping people learn, especially in an area where we're not used to that. So I think we'll start getting back to business as usual, and the biggest thing will just be to make some decisions about when we pull those machines out and if it makes sense and when that will occur.
Yeah, and you can find the audio clip of that sound on our website. It's posted, and it's about 5 seconds in, like you said, and you can hear it. It's a boom. It's there. You can hear it. We have another question? No more questions. Those are the questions I had for you. Thank you very much for joining us. You can watch a replay of this at postcrescent.com, and it'll be up there for a few more weeks.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.